everyone. My name is Ryan Cam. Welcome back to the road to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, where I'll be covering every Spider-Man movie I have yet to cover in honor of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, coming to theaters very soon. I've already covered parts 1 and 2 of the Raimi trilogy. Those reviews will be linked in the eye in the right-hand corner. I'm joined by Matt Wyatt and Jacob Martin, my podcast partner, respectively. So check those videos out. They're a lot of fun. But for right now, it's time to get down to some serious business. It's time to talk about Spider-Man 3. This was released in 2007, and it was the conclusion of the Raimi trilogy, though I'm sure we all didn't know it at the time. But before I get into my thoughts on the movie, I want to toss it over to my guest for this review. He's been on the channel a bunch before, and I'm happy to have him back. He's always welcome on the channel. Brevon from Brevon's Flicks and Games. Brevon, take it away.
Yours truly, Brevon Thompson, is back, and I want to give a big thank you to Ryan for inviting me back on his channel to talk about Spider-Man 3, the third and final film in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. I remember even before this film came out in 2007, after seeing Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, I was more than ready for Spider-Man 3 back then, because the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, well, the first two films in particular, meant a whole lot to me as a kid. So I was like on the hype train for Spider-Man 3. I thought that this was going to be like the greatest film ever made, that it was going to take us to the heavens and back. But sadly, that wasn't the case, because this is one of the most disappointing films I have ever seen in my life. Now, when it comes to like worst comic book films, I wouldn't add Spider-Man 3 to the list, because I've seen far, far worse than this. Because, I mean, it's not on, like, the same shit level that Batman and Robin and Catwoman are at, but there are enjoyable moments in Spider-Man 3, and some of those kind of, like, outweigh the, like, really bad moments in Spider-Man 3, because there's a whole lot that a lot of people on the internet have talked about, and I'm pretty sure that me and Ryan are going to also discuss that, because when it comes to those moments in particular, Jesus Christ. Before I delve into the negatives, I do want to talk about the positives first. For the most part, a large majority of the cast worked pretty well. Tobey Maguire I still like as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And some of the stuff that he goes throughout the film when he has the black suit, exploring the darker side of Peter Parker, some of that is interesting, but when it gets to, like, the stupid dance stuff and he becomes emo Peter, that I'll delve into later. But for the most part, he's still likable. I like what they do with James Franco as Harry and him becoming the new Goblin. Although there are some aspects of his story that I don't like, but how things play out in the third act when he and Peter team up to fight Sandman and Venom at the end is probably the best moment in the film, in my personal opinion. Some of the action sequences I do think still look pretty good. I mean, I already mentioned the final battle when Spider-Man and New Goblin team up to fight Sandman and Venom at the end. And there's the subway fight with the black suit Spider-Man against Sandman. And I even like the bare knuckle fight between Peter and Harry at his penthouse, and it's pretty badass for the most part. I also really like Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. And out of all the villains, I think he has probably the most interesting story arc out of all of them. And when it comes to his transformation scene, I really love what they managed to achieve with this. I mean, it's visual storytelling with no dialogue. And the film score I also really like, at this time composed by Christopher Young, who replaced Danny Elfman. Now, to the negatives. Everything that involves emo Peter, I do not like whatsoever. And of course, there's the dance number, I'm just, every time I see that, I'm like, what the hell am I watching right now? And I get it. I mean, it's the black suit corrupting him and everything like that. And if you look at the alien costume saga from the comics and how it was also perfectly adapted in the 90s cartoon, that was a much more interesting story than whatever they decided to do with that story arc in Spider-Man 3. And it's just like so much wasted potential. I mean, there was like so much interesting stuff that you can do with the black suit Spider-Man instead of just going do 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 do. And when they jab at that in Into the Spider-Verse, that always gets a laugh out of me.
We don't really talk about this.
Kirsten Dunst as MJ, I think, is pretty wasted in this film because how her character was utilized in the first two films, I mean, despite being the damsel in distress for the third act in both of those films, and of course this film as well, she doesn't really have like an interesting part in the story. She does have her issues, of course. I mean, she gets fired after getting terrible reviews from critics about her performance in this play. She is like back and forth on like between Harry and Peter, and of course there's that kiss that Peter gives Gwen Stacy in front of MJ when at the like Key to the City ceremony. I'm just like, wow, just wow. Even when I saw this when I was 9 years old, that always pissed me off. And of course, there's Topher Grace as Venom. A lot has been said about this performance, and I think that for the most part, this was a big mistake in terms of casting. What they attempt to do, I get it, but his character is wasted. I mean, he's supposed to be a rival for Peter. I mean, in terms of like getting a full-time job as a staff photographer for the Daily Bugle, and he has some pointless like attempts at romance with Gwen Stacy or lack thereof. And when he eventually turns into Venom, I remember being so excited to see Venom on the big screen because he has always been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. And we only get, 20 minutes of him as Venom? And I'm just like, come on, man. And to say that this film is a mess in terms of his writing is a massive understatement. And one of the screenwriters, Alvin Sargent, wanted to turn this into two parts. And if this was a two-part story, I think I would have been perfectly fine with it. Plus, Venom wasn't even supposed to be in this film in the first place, and Sam Raimi put Venom in the movie because Sony demanded it. Plus, Raimi's original plan was to include the Vulture, who was originally going to be played by Ben Kingsley, which actually would have been pretty interesting, really. But instead we had Topher Grace as Venom. I don't hate this film, but I have, a lot of problems with it, and I'm sure a lot of us do. But it's a shame, really, that Raimi's Spider-Man films ended after this film, because I would have wanted to, see more of, Raimi's films. But after the release of No Way Home, there's, of course, a big fan campaign for him to make Spider-Man 4. Will that happen? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out. But as a fan myself, fingers crossed. And again, I want to thank Ryan for inviting me on his channel. And guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Looking forward to doing more videos really soon on either Ryan's channel or my channel, Brevon's Flicks and Games. And if you want my thoughts on older new films, of course, you know where to find me.
Brevin's channel will be linked in the description. Go give him a subscribe. He really does have a quality channel. So, Spider-Man 3. This one is a bit complicated because this movie is very similar to that of the Star Wars prequels for me. When I first saw them, I loved them. But then as time went on and my film knowledge got a little bigger, I started to hate them. But then as my film knowledge got a little bigger, and as I got older and a little more mature, I realized that my hate was a little misplaced and recognized them as being imperfect, but largely good when it is good. And I think I could pretty much sum that up as my thoughts on Spider-Man 3. This movie is not perfect. It does have very visible problems that I happily acknowledge. However, the movie's actually really good. And I don't know how hot of a take that's going to be, but for the past number of years, and kind of similar to Spider-Man 1 and 2, as more superhero content has been released over the years, the better Spider-Man 3 has gotten for me, if for nothing else, the stuff that I like. As Brevon mentioned, the hype for this movie was near unbelievable. Marvel was clicking on all cylinders in the early to mid-2000s. They had two successful franchises going, Spider-Man and X-Men, and pretty much within striking distance of each other. In 2003, we got X2, and in 2004, we got Spider-Man 2. However, things started to go a little south. In 2006, X3 The Last Stand was released, and I honestly do not hate that movie. It actually has some pretty relevant stuff if what we know about 2020 and 2021 is all considered. However, that movie definitely has the feeling of wasted potential, especially with the Dark Phoenix side of things and Famke Janssen, and giving Magneto dialogue such as this.
Charles always wanted to build bridges.
Because he's lifting a bridge.
At that point, even God's going, "Do you get it?"
And then a year afterwards, we got Spider-Man 3. And, well, it was disappointing for quite a number of people. But similar to me in the prequels, when it comes to Spider-Man 3, I loved it when I first saw it, but then as the older I got, I recognized that it wasn't that great. But then, now that as I sit here a little older and hopefully a little wiser, I can safely say that Spider-Man 3, when it clicks on all cylinders, though being imperfect. I can largely say that this is by no means the worst superhero movie of all time, as I've seen in other reviews, because there have been some very harsh reviews that I have seen. And basically, some people, like, to my response, like, to those saying that this is, like, one of the worst, not in a universe where these movies exist. Since you're probably here to hear me talk about what I didn't like, here's what I didn't like. I can basically sum up the things that I didn't like in this movie to two camps. Too much going on and wasted potential. Too much going on meaning that you got 3 villains in this movie. That's way too much. The long-standing rumor going forward was that this movie was supposed to be a 2-parter, but it was squished into one at the last minute, a fact that Sam Raimi liked so much that he didn't direct another superhero movie until Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. When I was rewatching clips to prepare for this review, I could totally tell where the 2-part stuff would have come in. Honestly, it kind of writes itself. Have the Venom stuff be part 1, and then part 2 have the fallout of that. And I mean, it could be a little more elegant than how I just pitched it, but really you look at it and it feels like things are either over-explained or not explained enough. And it feels like even though the movie is pretty long, it doesn't feel long enough. The Sandman stuff could have been interesting. Up to this point, we knew that Spider-Man's killer had seemingly passed away and would be resolved. But no, it was actually the Sandman who killed Uncle Ben, and Peter doesn't take that quite well. That could have been very interesting if he just basically, well, turns into Michael Jordan.
It became personal with me.
And puts out a vendetta against the Sandman, and the two have a fight. But that doesn't really happen. Instead, we learn that, again, kind of playing into the theme of the trilogy, that Sandman is very much a sympathetic figure who, yes, being a criminal, basically wants to take care of his daughter at all costs. I mean, how can you not root against, how can you root against that? There's room for complexity and nuance in a character like the Sandman. Unfortunately, it's never truly realized. By far and away, the most interesting through line of the trilogy is the new Goblin. At the end of Spider-Man 2, Harry Osborn is left at a very deep crossroads. He knows that he has to make a choice. He either has to follow in his father's footsteps or try to get away from that in order to spare himself of that. And in my research, I found that Raimi was very interested in expounding upon that, and basically trying to play up that Harry Osborn is living in a world divided and doesn't really know what to do with himself. That was supposed to be explored a whole lot more, but it never is. And instead, after one action scene, he is given amnesia and then is randomly just remembers everything. Then they have their fight, and then Spider-Man and Goblin team up at the end to take out Venom. Again, there could have been so much there, but there isn't. And then there is Venom. Now, let me just get out in front and say that I have not seen a single episode of that 70s show, so I have no idea if Topher Grace was truly the insult that I hear that some people say that he was. Honestly, again, when Topher Grace is on, he is quite good. The scene in the church where he asks God to actually kill Spider-Man, high key, is honestly quite dark stuff. And I was actually talking to my friend Jacob Collins from 3D Movie Cinema. We were DMing each other about Spider-Man 3. And he was telling me that he always saw that scene as like he asked for a prayer to God, but instead got a response from the devil in the form of him essentially becoming Venom. That is awesome. And again, in my research, Raimi wanted to do more with this character. Basically, Eddie Brock in this movie was set to be the avatar for more of the TMZ style of journalism that was in vogue at the time. And oh boy, if this movie came out today, there would be plenty of ammunition to fire there. But instead, that doesn't really happen either. Instead, we get something revolving around him stealing and plagiarizing photos. Again, it's never capitalized on. There are kernels of brilliance sprinkled throughout, but unfortunately, it just feels very much like we got to put Spider-Man on the screen. I don't care how, we just have to do it. It's like, it's rapid fire. It's too fast and not fast enough. It's a paradox. Now I know I sound like I'm trashing this movie, but I promise you I am not. Because, like I said, this movie is imperfect. However, when this movie is on, it's some of the best stuff that Raimi did with the character. The fight scenes are genuinely some of the best in the entire trilogy. The fight between Peter and Harry after, like the first fight between them when Harry's trying out the new Goblin suit for the first time. The fist fight in the penthouse is legit my favorite scene in the movie, and it has two of my favorite one-liners in the entire trilogy. There's a part where Harry gets taken down and he's like, I protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass. And Spider-Man basically does the Scott Hall, ooh. It's wonderful.
I protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass.
And then when Peter has Harry down in like the Goblin room, he's like, aw, look at little Goblin Jr. You gonna cry?
Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
The ending fight between Venom, New Goblin, and Spider-Man when they eventually reunite. When Peter gets the Venom symbiote for the first time and goes after the Sandman in the subway, seeing half of Sandman's face basically be sawed off by the train. It's low-key kind of beautiful. I guess this is as good a place as any to parlay into talking about Venom, and specifically when Peter gets the black suit. And people have talked about nearly to death about, the dancing thing, and the Bully Maguire meme has become a meme at this point. And yes, from a certain point of view, it is very silly. However, as I've gotten older, I've kind of recognized that I'm not as big a hater on it as others. I think it boils down to the fact that Peter Parker, up until this point, has been kind of the good guy. And now that he's gotten a taste of what being evil is like, he kind of wants to dip more than a toe into that pool. And he's never really done it before. He's kind of inexperienced. So to him, it's kind of like this meme where the dude is like looking at the butterfly and like, is this? Insert name of text here. It's basically him going, is this evil? I recognize that, yes, it is indeed very silly. However, I'm not as big a hater on it as literally everyone else. There's a bit of a theme throughout that Peter is getting a little more arrogant because he's getting a little more good at being Spider-Man when he starts out. He's dropping more and more one-liners. Like when he's fighting the Sandman for the first time, the Sandman's like, leave now. And Sandman's like, oh, you didn't get the memo? I'm the sheriff in town. It's like little things like that that make you go, okay, Peter, I think you're in need of a bit of a reality check. Lest we forget, just a movie prior, Peter was at rock bottom. Now he's like back on top, and it's like he forgot all of that. It's done pretty well, in my opinion. His relationship with MJ starts out as never better, but then goes south, kind of playing into the theme of they're so close, but yet so far. And it's done pretty well. This is like the worst MJ is treated in all these movies because she starts out on Broadway and she gets terrible reviews and then she's fired and basically has to go back to where she started in Spider-Man 1 as a waitress. It's honestly kind of heartbreaking to see. This is a movie that has gotten better for me as the years have gone on because as more and more superhero movies have come out, I've recognized that some are not really that great per se. And really, Spider-Man 3, I remember more about that than I remember like the two previous MCU movies we've gotten. I'm recording this the weekend of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I haven't seen it yet, so that could change. But I remember Spider-Man 3 off the top of my head more than I do Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. And they came out a couple of months ago, so they're still fairly recent. But I can't remember them. I remember pretty much everything about Spider-Man 3 from cover to cover. I do recognize that, yes, Spider-Man 3 is not particularly like the greatest comic book movie of all time. It has a lot of problems. However, when this movie is on, it's some of the best material of early to mid 2000s comic book movies, and I will defend that wholeheartedly. I'm going to give this movie a great rating. Again, step down from 1 and 2, but at the same time, there is a lot more going on here that is worthy of appreciation. I pass it now off to you. What did you think of Spider-Man 3? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read what you have to say. And next week, we're going to be continuing with a bit of a double header. We're going to be talking about the Mark Webb Spider-Man movies, The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I'm happy to be joined by Ryan from the channel Realspective to do a deep dive into those films. But if you like this video, please sure leave a like and subscribe to the channel and click the bell to allow notifications so when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.